All right, so balancing feedback and evaluation today. Welcome. If you just got here, we were starting to talk about the soup, salad, sandwich theory, which attempts to explain that all foods can be plotted on an axis, soup, a salad, or a sandwich. If that's true, what is pizza? And that was just to get started. So agreements, the presentation format today is a panel discussion. If anybody is watching or watches down the road, just normal etiquette that we all know now in this new Zoom world. Be present, video on, be aware of your mute status. And if you have a question for any one of these panelists, then please use the chat feature. So I'd like to introduce our panelists today. We'll start with Stephanie. Stephanie, if you don't mind introducing yourself.
I am Stephanie Nasser. I'm an 8th grade English teacher at Albion Middle School. I already forgot my pizza. Why do I like to teach writing? I love the process. I love teaching the process, and I love students seeing their growth from like their first time writing a paragraph to a multi-paragraph essay over time, over the year, to see what they are capable of doing. Since they usually start off the year with such doubt and trepidation that by the time we get to January and then by the time we get to April, the progress is huge.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Heike, how about you?
I am Heike Pedersen. I teach at Draper Park Middle School. I teach 8th grade English, just like Stephanie. Why do I love to teach writing? I love to teach writing because I like to watch kids learn how to process logically and to have it actually make sense. To have to think logically to explain how this evidence supports this claim that I have made, and to watch them make those connections and to, again, grow in their confidence. And as I ask leading or prompting questions, if they're struggling, to kind of watch the aha turn on and they're like, oh, is that all it is? Yes, that's all it is. Oh, so that's my favorite.
Awesome. Ritter, how about you?
Michelle Ritter, Corner Canyon High School, mostly 11th and 12th grade English. And I like to teach writing because I like to show them that they can. So many of them think that they can't do it at all. And then when they figure out that they actually can do it, then they're not so reluctant later on.
Thank you. Leona.
I'm Leona. I teach at Midvale Middle School. I also teach 8th grade ELA. The reason why I like the component of writing in my job is I like to see the creative side of my students that comes out in the form of writing. Even when we're doing informational writing and argumentative writing, the way that they are able to craft and create their writing and using their creativity in a more academic way than artistic way is just really interesting and really fun to see.
Cool, right on.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christine. I teach at Brighton High School. I get to teach the best stuff I teach 9th and 12th graders. I also get to teach journalism, some creative writing online, and film. I love hearing kids' stories, and I think that I love to see that in writing. Well, and just them telling stories, period. So whether it's in a video news story or podcast, I think they all have great imaginations, but it also like shares who they are.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just dive right in then. I have a series of topics, and again, we can veer off. I think the main goal is really, what does it mean to do our work and to be effective in the work that we do? Kelly Gallagher and Penny Kittle say, students need a volume of ungraded practice in order to become better writers. And one of the quotes that they used was, volume, to be sure, does not equate with quality, but young writers can't get to quality without volume. So given that, and I'm going to open this to everybody, what strategies do you use, whether it's an 8th, 11th, 12th, an elective type class, but what strategies do you use to increase the volume of low stakes writing for your students?
Well, I was inspired after this summer in our PD. I came back and I convinced my principal to buy me journals for all of my classes. And so we start every day with some kind of journal activity that I just say, hey, like pick one thing that you want me to read. And so we talked about in the beginning that like I'm looking for growth and progress and just being able to get your ideas. So like try to write a little bit more every day. It's been, asked me yesterday, I would have said it's a complete failure. It's also at the end of the try, and I'm feeling maybe just a little bit down on what I could have done differently. But what's been great is sometimes just looking through their journals, like some people will write forever and they have a lot to say and they're used to it. They probably journal at home. Some people, depending on the topic, they get to write about something they haven't been able to write about before. I have one kid who has said nothing during the whole trimester, but he writes about his Toyota 4Runner every day in some way. Even if it's a poem, he writes about it and how much he's put into this car. And I feel like he and I have gotten, we have a better relationship because of it. I can ask him about it. And I saw him working at a fast food restaurant and he looked outside and he's looked, that's another car that I talk about all the time. And
Yes.
at least for us personally, it's been a really good thing. But I have been a little butthurt because when you tell kids that it's not going to be, like, I'm not going to grade every little thing, that it's about them writing. I'm so sorry. Some kids would rather just sit there. They write one sentence every day, and then the next day they'll write one sentence and one word, and then they'll just sit there. So I tried like different times. I'm like, well, maybe maybe I'm giving you too much time. They'll shorten it and you can take a stab at that. It's been a little bit of a struggle, but when I stop worrying about those people who like, maybe they aren't going to love writing and it's just the practice of writing a little bit every day. I'm a little bit more forgiving of the trimester and it feels a little bit more successful, but I don't know yet.
I want to respond to Christine. And so every kid, we give them out comp books where they take all their notes. And I think first and foremost, when it comes to writing and for them, I think it's the handwriting first. They're always like, oh, my hand is tired, right? Because they're not used to using a pen or a pencil. I think with writing the non-graded part, like we have them do multiple drafts that are not graded, right, for the process. And then I'm actually going to use the Gallagher line of instead of final draft, best draft. And to see, and Scott and I were talking earlier this week about changing, instead of me saying fragment, awkward, doesn't make sense. I used this week, I'm like, I'm confused by, and I filled it in. And it actually prompted them to think further about what they're saying versus being repetitive. I think it's really hard in today's day and age to get away from the grading, non-grading process because of just the world that we live in education. I find with 8th graders, at least here at Albion, that they need structure. They are desperate for structure because without some structure, they don't know what to do. And when we're trying to teach them informative and argumentative, we don't want them to write things like, I think, or this shows that, or, or get an answer like, the same. So with the comp books that we now have them using for note taking and drafting, it seems to really help their process. But we find like in the beginning of the year, they're always like, my hand hurts. Because they're not used to the physical act of writing. And we tell them the reason we do this is because it forces their brain, it forces them, right? That whole rote learning of taking it from the brain and putting it in your hand and putting it down. So they have to really think about what they're actually going to write. Versus I think when they type, they skip words and they don't even, they type so fast or whatever. So that's my take on the process and the drafting and the non-grading.
Leona, we had a conversation last week about what did you call it? Like was it the insignificant?
I call it reckless writing. And that means for my students that they have quick writes. They don't have them every day. But about every other day, my students have a quick write. And it could be about anything. Sometimes it's geared towards what we're doing. Then sometimes it's just like a normal prompt. But I call it reckless writing or, irresponsible writing, where I set a timer and I say, you are to write. I am to hear the clicky clacky of your keyboard for 5 minutes. The whole 5 minutes. I don't care what you're writing. I want you to just write. I want you to answer this question And every thought that comes into your little brain, I want you to write it down. And I do this to get them used to period writing, like time structured writing. Because I've noticed when I give it to WSBA, my students cannot sustain writing for copious amounts of time. So when I give them a timed amount, they know they have to write for that amount of time. And then when we do writing in class, and all of this is non-graded writing. They get, like, if they turn it in, it's a complete or incomplete. There's no grade attached to it. And they know this, and they all participate. Again, some with vigor and then some with disdain. I'll call it that. Because they're not happy that they have to do it. But I am getting more and more students who are willing to participate because it is irresponsible writing. I don't care that words are misspelled. I don't care that words are missing. I don't care the grammars are atrocious. I just want them to practice getting what's in their brain onto paper without there being this big giant roadblock. And I've noticed, since my students have been doing this since the beginning of the year, they had to write an informational paper on either a conspiracy theory or a unsolved mystery. If you know me, that makes sense. And I saw a lot of students be able to read an article and go right into writing their own, like, rough draft or notes without much, oh my gosh, I don't know what to write. Because they understand the first step is just getting what's in your brain onto paper, and then we sort through it. We sort through the mess and find the good. And so I use irresponsible, reckless writing almost every day in my room, and my kids like it. It gives them a chance to vent, because sometimes I'm like, vent about one thing that happened in your life, and like this past week, and they'll vent about a fight with a friend or whatever, and it just gives them an outlet, and they like it. It's interesting, it's fun. So reckless writing is something I do.
I like the title too. That's edgy. You know, if I'm an 8th grader or I'm a high schooler and you say irresponsible or reckless, I automatically want to do it. You know, heck, I'm not even there and I still want to do it right now. It's reckless. Let's go. So awesome. I'm going to move into the next question and throw this one at Heike and at Ritter. And this was topic 3, which is that students need practice in reading like writers. So the questions would be, how do you use mentor texts with your students as a scaffold to guide their writing? Or what strategies do you use to get your readers to read like writers?
Well, I will start with that. I read that section in the book, and the question that I wrote, it says, so I put, oh no, wait, where did that go? Need practice in reading like writers. And one of the things that it was talking about in the section was conferencing with students and going through and reading their paper like they would kind of be a writer and giving feedback that way. And anyway, I took that because it said they do this every day. And I was like, how do you do this every day? Maybe, I don't know, if you're in a high school setting where you have an 1.5 hour class period, that might be a little more feasible, but at the same time, you only meet every other day. And so that still takes an amazing amount of time. And what are the other kids doing? And so I had all kinds of questions, because I was like, oh, every day you meet with kids every day and conference with them? So I didn't know how to do that. But with the practice in reading like writers, when I'm reading texts with students, I will often point out, oh, let's read that line again. Look at what the author did here. So Scott, you introduced, because Draper Park, we're still following in your legacy with Chris Candless and Death of an Innocent. And John Krakauer has several lines in there that just touch my heart. Like the mountains are like a rumpled blanket. And there's one line, I can't remember the exact words now, but there's one where he is saying, he's expressing the grief that the parents would feel at the loss of a son. And he just says it so beautifully and so expressively. And so I stop and I point those out. I'm like, look at what he did here. Let's look at this language. What are some other ways that he could have said this? You know, could he have just literally said this? And today we went over figurative and literal language. And okay, figurative language, you have to figure out what they're saying and how much how much more depth does it add? And so just stopping and pausing and looking at those kinds of things, I think helps them to grow as readers. But then also when I'm reading a text and with the kids and it gives a piece of evidence and then it explains what that evidence mean, I'll say, oh my gosh, do you see what they just did? Is that what we're supposed to do too? And, and point that out and, oh, look, they just used a citation. They just told you where that came from. Does that make
Right.
it seem more credible? So doing those kinds of things and saying, oh, they gave credentials here. They told you why we should listen to this person. So using those kinds of things with my, 13 and 14-year-old kids as they are learning how to read shows them that, yes, what I'm teaching you to do is actually what people do. And here's a way that we can do it to make it a little bit better and interesting. So
Love that. That's awesome. Thank you. What are your thoughts, Ritter?
Sort of the same, some of the same stuff. One of the things that in English 1010 this year, they had to write a narrative, and along with another teacher, Danielle Clark, we came up with a bunch of memoirs that we've had them read, from Sherman Alexie to a whole bunch of other ones. And in each one, we had them look at a specific writing style that they did, whether it was an extended metaphor or whether it was the use of hyperbole or something. And we pointed it out to them. We had them read it. We talked a lot about why they use those particular things. And then they had to do a free write or a quick write. And Christine, I got a little butthurt too, because a kid called it, oh, this is garbage writing, right? I was like, because I said, it doesn't matter if it's perfect. We're just trying to practice all this. But, and then they would write and they would try to incorporate that same, whatever that narrative technique was, in their own writing, so that they could see what it was like, and even sometimes to understand how difficult it is. I think part of being a good writer is appreciating good writing, right? And so although I know Scott completely disagrees with me, The Great Gatsby is such a beautiful book. And he has so many beautiful lines in there, and a lot of his other writing as well, that I think they just kind of read over to see what the plot is, but they don't stop to understand the beauty of the actual words. And so by having them kind of hyper focus on one technique in one section of a writing, I feel like they can sometimes kind of get it and try to incorporate it into their own writing.
I love that you're bringing that up. One of the quotes that stands out to me, and I think this is a good segue into the next topic, but the quote was, if students take risks and we grade every stumble, then they're going to stop moving. And I think a lot of what I've just heard is speaking to that. Whether it's irresponsible writing or take something and play around with it, or pointing out as you're reading, like Krakauer or any other author, and pointing out, hey, look at how they use this language and here's why they did it. So I think this is probably the biggest wicked problem of being an English teacher. And that is, how do we grade writing without killing ourselves? And I know we all have different techniques. I know we have all given up many weekends and Sundays and Saturdays and everything else to grade. But what practices have you found that are most effective in giving feedback to your students?
I probably give up more of I know I give up way more of my life than I should. But that being said, I have found, because again, remember, my kids are 13 and 14 years old and they are beginning writers. So we're still looking at the very basic foundations. And I have found that using the iPad with an Apple Pencil and the Canvas on the iPad with their submissions has been an absolute life changer, because then I can actually physically write on their essay. I can say, what did you mean here? I'm confused. Like Stephanie was saying, I'm confused about this. What does this mean? I think I'll even put sometimes an ellipsis, ... You need to continue this explanation, and so I can do those kinds of things right on it. And it's made a big difference. The other thing that I have done is I attach to each section, and I know they talk about they don't like rubrics in here, and I'm sorry, I love my rubrics. I heartily disagree with
I
so-
agree with you because I totally disagree with that section. The example they give is a crappy rubric.
Yes, and I
So
looked at that and I did too. I wrote, this is not what my rubric looks like.
right.
But so I color code my rubrics too. So when it says thesis statement, I say blue marks. When it's evidence, it's red marks. And I use those different colors as I'm going through and I'm grading, so that when they're looking at this, okay, I didn't do well here, and then they go and they look at the red and they can look at what I've got written in the rubric. And sometimes all I do is I'll just underline or highlight a part in just a color without making any kind of comment. And then they go in and they look at the rubric to determine where in the rubric they made the mistake. I also go over common mistakes the day. So I grade, and then I hide the grades while I'm grading, so that I don't have kids going in and trying to fix before I give an explanation, because then the next day in class too, I'll spend 10 or 15 minutes going over, okay, guys, everybody open up your essays, open up your graded essays. These are the common mistakes that I saw. If you have this mark, this is what this means. And so I'll go through, and by now most of them know what that means, but that has been life changing. I can grade so much more quickly and so much more effectively, and give them effective feedback they can use then to resubmit and try again.
You don't have to raise your hand, Stephanie.
Okay. I want to just feed off of what Heike said. We teach our rubric first. We love our rubric too. It's very specific to what we do, and we put it in the kid language, right? So they understand how they talk, and that's how we write it. And we literally say, this is what you're going to be graded on. This is what we're going to look at. And the kids are by this time we're on essay 7, I think. And they're psyched because they're like, wow, I got a perfect score on my thesis, but my conventions are bad, or my elaborations where I need to work on. I am old school. I print and hand edit because that's how my brain works. And so for us, we find that works really well, because when they get it back, it's not graded or anything. They physically fix it, and then they mark it on the paper, and they know that they fix that mistake before they go on to fix the next mistake. And again, beginning writers, like, it's a slow and steady process for sure. And the other point that Heike made is that we sit there and point out things to them, like, okay, everybody in the room did not understand how to do X. So let's go ahead and, work on X. And maybe it's like right now we're working on them taking out, this shows that, and I know that's so small, but in big picture, it's not, right? So we work on, and they get stressed, and we come up with sentence frames, and we literally give them sentence frames sometimes, and we're like, stick this in there. But using that terminology is, I'm confused by, with the dot, and then I put it in, and then I say, try ... And like Heike said, they know. And when I edit, then they edit each other's, and we do color coding too. I'm like, where's the thesis highlighted in blue? Where's the example highlighted in green? Is it have a parenthetical citation? And we use that academic vocabulary because we want them all to have the same. So when they go on to Brighton or Corner Canyon or Hillcrest, they have a quote unquote formula that works for them in their head. And I don't know if Christine has seen it. I don't know if she knows who our students are. She's nodding, like, versus another teacher at another school, because it's so hard in 8th grade to get them from writing exactly what the teacher tells them, like word for word, than to come up with their own ideas. And that's where we're at. That's where our focus is prior to getting to argumentative, because we know that argumentative, even though it's a longer essay, it tends to be easier for them because they're experienced in, one side versus the other side.
Something to kind of add to a little bit of that is the idea that, again, I'm all for rubrics. And a very detailed rubric, I think, really helps the kids. I have a Post-it note on my computer of all the comments that I say most often. And I have one for narrative, I have one for analysis, I have one for research. And I have started actually putting those in the assignment for the kids and say, these are the things that I most often say, so that they know what to look for or try to avoid, or to actually do when they're doing their writing. And then the other thing is, which is a little bit of a shift from maybe the 8th grade to the 11th or 12th grade, is by the time they get to 1010, one of the goals of the 1010 course is for them to develop their own identity and to create their own voice, and to get away from the 5-paragraph essay of the introduction, conclusion, 3 body paragraphs with 2 pieces of evidence sandwiched in between, our exact thing that we've told them, which they need that structure at first because they have no idea where to start. But then, like I think you were talking about, they start to use it as a crutch, and they don't know how to do it without saying, this shows that she is whatever, right? And so that's something that I've been trying to work with on them, and the rubrics, and even as far as just like cutting back on grading time. I'm having those post-its, those digital post-its on my computer. I can literally copy and paste the same comments, because there are a lot of kids who list and don't elaborate, or whatever it happens to be. And so that's one way I can deal with the volume of it. I'm actually sitting here trying to grade 65 rhetorical analysis essays today. So this is kind of where I am with it as well.
I was actually just thinking about how lucky we are, because the kids come and they have like they ask for a rubric right off the front, like from the beginning. Hey, what's the rubric like? What am I going to be looking for? They know what needs to be there. And just like any kid, like I could teach a kid from sophomore year and teach them again senior year, and they have no idea what I talked about. And I'm like, do you remember this? I'm like, yeah, honestly, I come into your class and then when I leave, I don't remember. So, but I do notice that, like, I think we get a lot of kids who come with really good, like a fantastic foundation. And when they come in, like, they're ready to go. I teach a lot of like regular 12A, regular 9 students. And I don't know if you find this, but I don't get a lot of people who look at my comments on the rubric or on their page. And so that's kind of how I've been dealing with grading. I actually focus mostly on the rubric. And then if they want to talk about it, we can talk about it after. Another thing I do is we write in class. And so I make my rounds that way, and we talk about things that they're missing. We've been doing, like when we did our rhetorical analysis, I had them sit in the tables of the essay that they chose to read and analyze. And so they kind of helped each other out. I put like a little kind of a skeleton thing on the board saying like, this is kind of what I'm looking for. And they help each other find that. And then I just make my rounds that way. It's been a little bit easier because when I go through and I grade the end, like I can see where they're thinking and where they're going. And so it's a little bit easier to use a rubric that way. But I am a terrible grade. I hate grading. And again, I don't know why I'm so super sensitive. And I think it's because it's the end of the trimester. It hurts my feelings when they don't read my comments. And so I've been trying like the past, I told Scott yesterday, I'm like, I'm not feeling like a very good writing teacher right now. And then I think it's because I think there's a lot of forgiveness and grace that needs to happen for teachers about being able to, to understand that the kids are going through the process of learning to write. And so I might talk about it and I think I'm being a fantastic teacher, but maybe they're not ready for that. And maybe I didn't explain it the right way. So it's a process that I think I have to remember, that I struggle to remember. I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is, but I think rubrics are amazing. I want to write better rubrics. So I know Michelle wrote like, it would be great if we had a Google folder of shared rubrics. When I use Canvas, I'm always looking to see what other people have. And sometimes they're so detailed, I don't know the difference between a 3 and a 4. Like in my head, I just want to do attempt and hey, you got it, good job. But I think that's an example of a bad rubric in the book. So
I don't know that that's an example of a bad, well, there's a lot I agree with and disagree with in the book, but I found myself moving closer, more towards 1-point rubrics. Once, not in the beginning, because I agree with Heike and Stephanie with the structure had to be there. So I needed a rubric that had the whole structure. But once we were later in the year, I could do, got it, don't. you showed you could do it. No, you didn't. And then the conversation would go that way. Why didn't I? And then if I could conference, I would do that kind of a deal. So I know we're running sort of over a little bit, but I'd like to wrap it up with one of your thoughts with everybody. And thank you again for coming here and trying this out. Feel free to give me some feedback on if you think this worked or not. And I will reach out tomorrow to see if you have any rubrics to share, and I'll start compiling a folder of rubrics that I can get my hands on that other schools are using, whether it's high school, middle school, whomever, and I'll put that on the site. That's on the last page of this this slideshow that I'll put, that'll accompany the bite-sized PD, but I'll also email it to you as well. So the last question then that is, what advice would you give to a teacher who's struggling to teach writing? What's the one piece of advice you would give?
Rome wasn't built in a day. It takes time. It takes patience. But if you work them through their struggles, they'll get it. You just have to take your time.
Love it.
I might say something like, pick one thing, just one thing to work on when you're starting, and go from there. And don't try to fix everything at once. Pick one thing, get good at that, then you can add more.
I emphasize with them the process, and I might say the same thing 6, 7, 10 times in one period. But I always say it's a process. And I think the most valuable thing I've learned since teaching middle school is that, like, we recently looked at their very first paragraph they wrote in August and what they're doing today. And there's not one kid that doesn't have that aha moment. Oh my God, I'm able to do. Look what you're building. And so I think for them to see their own progress is always a positive, because it doesn't matter if they started the year with writing 1 sentence and now they're only writing 4, it's still progress, right? And give yourself grace if you can't grade or you can't read. I am old and I've just been doing this a really long time. So I think that's why, grading to me is just a thing, and I give up my weekends and I don't think twice, but give yourself grace, just like we have to give them grace, right?
I agree with what Michelle said. Pick 1 or 2 things that you're focusing on. Focus on those as you are teaching the writing, and then focus on those as you are grading the writing.
I love that. I'm really grateful for that, read or focus on one thing. I was telling a mentor that I was struggling with my problem of practice. I wanted to improve writing these perfect paragraphs. He's like, well, what do you want from them? And I'm like, well, I want them to do this and analyze this and explain this. And he's like, but you've got like 5 different things in this one assignment. And so I realized, like, I'm trying to, like, my goal is to be more like just focus on that one thing. And if I had to tell, like, Christine from 10 years ago, like, some advice, it would be really what you just said, to like calm down and follow the process I expect the kids to follow. And I would add in to, like, take time to write yourself. So in the kids journal, I try to journal too. Sometimes if we write poetry, I'll write on the board so they can see my process. And sometimes I write really poor poetry, and it's okay. So trying to do a little bit, I'm trying to, I guess, remember all of these things, because I think I'm at 11 years now, and I think it's really easy to forget some of the very basic things that I learned, and I've had really great mentors teach me, and I just go through the grind every day. So that's amazing, and I will remember those things.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody here, and thank you for the great advice, and I appreciate it. So each one of you, we work together. I'm glad that this is a forum where other people get to hear the kinds of conversations that I get to have with you when we're just talking in a classroom. So, all right. Well, thank you. for more ELA resources, if you would like to visit the repository of ELA goodies, such as our nibble-sized podcast or our morsel-sized resources, check out All Day ELA. You can also find other bite-sized PDs in there. And a lot of the book we were referencing today is 180 Days by Kelly Gallagher and Penny Kittle, specifically chapter 5. Important links, if you do watch this, the Canyon Zoo page, the bite-sized PD page, and then if you watch this and would like licensure credit, then there's the link for that.